Hey everybody, welcome to Q&A video number 55. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but now that I actually have questions, I can certainly resume doing Q&As. Make sure to keep asking questions. Doesn't matter if they're about, they can be about anything. They don't have to be about gaming. But know that I will not respond to review requests or Let's Play requests in these videos, but I will respond to them in the comments. That's stuff like, what do you think about insert game here? I'm actually pretty tired of people asking me that when it comes to these Q&As, because I give this disclaimer in every single Q&A video, and yet people keep asking. Anyway, gameplay in the background is Assassin's Creed Revelations because it fits in with this first question here, which is from ZPS Best Profile Name. When you play video games, do you ever feel that whatever you're doing is ultimately a waste of time? Obviously, anyone could argue anything is a waste of time because we all die in the end, but if you could just discuss that with relation to other things that may be more or less rewarding in the long term. Well, as far as gaming goes, really any kind of entertainment is ultimately, quote, a waste of time, unquote. And yet, at the same time, it's not a waste of time. What do I mean by that? Well, as long as you get something out of it, then it's not a waste of time. Unlike in, say, Assassin's Creed Revelations case, which just feels like I am getting absolutely nothing out of it, and it just feels like a vapid waste of time. But I'm going to soldier through it because I need to review it before I get to Assassin's Creed 3, which is going to be even worse, I imagine. And then I need to go through that to get to Assassin's Creed 4. So it's just this kind of nasty mess that I've got. But I do have this issue with regards to certain games. Certain games really do feel like a waste of time. Diablo clones, JRPGs, MOBAs, they all feel like a complete waste of time to me. To other people, they're not. Some people get something out of them, I don't. So ultimately what is a waste of time is a very subjective thing. But with regards to other things, they may be the same problem. For instance, I do a lot of creative writing, I do some drawing on occasion, and a lot of that feels like a waste of time when I don't really go anywhere with it. But at the time I'm doing it, it doesn't feel like a waste of time. It's just getting ideas on paper. And if you get something out of it, then ultimately that's what it's there for. Entertainment and creativity are there for a reason. They are not just there to fill the empty void of time, so to speak. So, as far as relation to other things, again, it's a very subjective thing. As long as you're getting something out of it, and that something is not complete irritation like it is with a lot of these games that I'm playing, then it may not necessarily be a waste of time, although in some cases I can't remotely comprehend why people actually get anything out of something. But hey, if they like it, then they like it. Let's move on to a question from Dr. Doomsday Device. Are you sick and tired of history repeating itself with controversy over violent video games? For example, people have been whining and crying and making a big fuss over hatred, even though the exact same thing happened when the first Postal game came out back in 1997. Well, first things first, I don't know if there was as huge a controversy over the original Postal as there was with Postal 2, because I certainly remember the controversy over Postal 2, but I don't remember the controversy over the original Postal. I just remember it kind of being a footnote. But then again, back in the 90s, gaming and PC gaming in particular was a pretty niche thing, and PC gaming was mostly adults anyway, so it didn't really matter all that much what PC gaming was getting. I mean, we'd had violent games on PC for years at that point, and really the main controversy over just general violence in games happened much earlier in the 90s, before the ESRB was a thing. Once the ESRB happened, it was pretty much just a no-brainer. It's like, oh, follow the ratings. No big deal, really. It wasn't really until the mid-2000s when they started experimenting more with sex in video games that you started to see more controversy. Because Americans are apparently prudes like that, and it drives me crazy whenever they go berserk over, oh my god, it's a nipple! It's just ridiculous, frankly. But Postal 2 was the one that really got big on controversy, and it wasn't for the violence. It was more for how ridiculously offensive the game is. And if you don't take it seriously, then, you know, it's not that big a deal. But a lot of people seem to take it very seriously, and I have no idea why. Meanwhile, you have hatred, which is basically just riding the controversy. It was made from the very beginning to be, ooh, this is edgy and evil and brutal and stuff like that. And so when people actually saw that and overreacted to it, that's the only reason we have a controversy over it now. Honestly, I think that's the only reason it got the AO rating is because of the controversy it generated. If you just take it on its own, it's an M-rated game. There's nothing really special about hatred. Like you said in your question here, it's basically just Postal all over again, only for some unfathomable reason, this one just pushed the right buttons to piss people off, and frankly, it should have just been a footnote in gaming history and nothing more. So yes, I'm really tired of the constant controversy in a video game thing. Frankly, can we just stop with the controversy in games at all? I don't care whether it's for violence or sex or language or whatever it may well be. It's an entertainment medium, and if used properly, can be an art form. It's going to have controversial things in it, so we need to just behave like mature people and move on. Who am I kidding? It's not really gamers that are freaking out over things. Anyway, let's move on to a question from Archbishop. If you could do anything for a living and money didn't matter, what would you do and why? Probably work in a museum as a historian or curator or something like that. It probably sounds kind of odd, doesn't it? But I've actually just always had a really big interest in history, namely medieval history, and it just seems like something that would be really cool to do. So, there you go. Next question is from Michael DeEsta, and if I pronounce that wrong, please correct me. What are your favorite novels, fiction or nonfiction? It'd be interesting to hear you share your thoughts on them with regards to why they're your favorites. Well, the first thing that pops into mind is, of course, Tolkien, namely The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Less so on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, more on The Hobbit. I don't know why it's always stuck with me, but it has. So, there's that. There's, of course, more recently, I got into A Song of Ice and Fire, and those are pretty fantastic books. They certainly scratch that kind of medieval history while still being fantasy vibe that I certainly like. And there's things like the older Tom Clancy novels like The Hunt for Red October, Rainbow Six, things like that. I certainly like those. Newer stuff not so much, but the older stuff definitely. I rather like Cormac McCarthy's The Road. If you haven't read that, it's a post-apocalyptic novel and it's very, very good. There's a variety of other books that I read that aren't necessarily novels per se, like Shakespeare or the Odyssey, although in the case of Shakespeare, do not bring up Romeo and Juliet or Midsummer Night's Dream because I frickin' despise those two. The rest are mostly fine, but those two in particular I really hate. But as far as my favorite Shakespeare play goes, Othello. There's other classics too, things like Robinson Crusoe, Treasure Island, things like that. A lot of those more classic novels like that. Really, you'd kind of have to ask me on a more individual basis, because just going off the top of my head, I read quite a few books, so it's kind of rough organizing my thoughts like that. Sort of like if you ask me, what are your favorite video games? I've played hundreds of them. And while a few always pop to mind instantly, it's too hard to just kind of organize my thoughts like that on the fly. Anyway, this last question is from Skullrod. Do you think world peace is attainable? Nope! Human nature is quite simply far too borked for that, and of course when you've got so many weird ideologies in this world, where a lot of them just have to do with completely annihilating everyone else on the planet who is not one of you because reasons, well, it's just not going to happen. And it would basically require a fundamental rewrite of every single culture on the planet, which is basically impossible, and frankly, I don't think should happen, because diversity of culture is a perfectly fine thing, although there are some aspects of these various cultures that should change. Although it's really easy to just say that that's, oh, you're just pushing your Western ideas on everyone else. No, not necessarily. Human decency, more of a thing. But apparently human decency is not enough these days, and that's partly why we don't have world peace, and why it's probably never going to happen. So yeah, that's kind of a depressing note to end it on, but that was Q&A 55, and I'll catch you guys in later videos. But make sure to keep asking questions so I can keep doing these.